welcome back to the We Don't Know It All podcast. This is episode 7. This was a pretty long episode, the longest to date, I believe. We talked about maybe splitting it up, but we just think it's too good of a conversation to separate, so we're going to keep it all together. In this episode, I kind of tell Francisco a little bit about a trip to Portland that I just got back from and a conference that I attended that honestly I'm a different person and a different leader because of. You do not want to miss this episode. Also, just as a quick update for those of you who have been asking us, we are in the process of getting merch ready to sell. So be on the lookout on our social media, any announcements we may make towards that merch drop. So you don't want to miss that, but we're about to kick off this episode. Lean in and listen and take notes. It's going to be good. It's been a few weeks since we have recorded. Well, it's been a while since we've recorded, and it's been probably a week or two since we posted.
Yes. However, I remember at the beginning of this podcast journey, episode 0, we talked about how ministry was on the go.
Yeah.
And Cadyn was out on a trip, which is kind of the meat of today's podcast.
Yep.
And then we had a lot going on here at North Place at the same time. And then I had a lot going on with the family. I'm older now. I'm 21 years old now.
Yeah. You were 20 and you just had a birthday. So now you're 21.
So now I'm 21. Those of you that know my real age, don't just leave
We're not going to talk about
Just
that.
Just leave it. But yeah, so we're excited to be back though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Cadyn, tell us about this wonderful trip that you just took.
Well, yeah. So I guess even before we get into that, let's just kind of address something. Today's podcast is going to be this episode, and we're clearly recording as we're talking. So There is a chance that this episode will be divided into 2. We don't know that yet. I have a lot to say to you.
Right.
But the reason this episode is different is I just got back from a trip with my wife to Portland, Oregon. And so normally you and I don't spend much time preparing for these podcasts so that they're real conversations.
Right.
But we normally have an idea of where we're both coming from. Mm-hmm. And this time, I feel like I'm just reporting to you and just recording your
I'm gonna be
reactions.
honest. I have no idea what's going on right now. I am excited because I want to get to know everything that you went through and you learned there at the conference. But it is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because this can go 20 different ways, and I have no idea where it's going.
Yeah. Well, and all of this information right now is in my head, and I'm genuinely super excited and passionate about it.
I'll say
it's just all these little nuggets,
Let's go.
So we may or may never do this again, but even if you're like, Cadyn,
I'm excited.
Those are not
Look,
those
I'm
truths.
gonna get comfortable. If you're watching on YouTube, get comfortable because this might be a long one.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be good.
Yeah. So basically what happened was my wife and I's second wedding anniversary was October 16th. At the time of this recording, it's November 1st. We don't normally talk about dates, but at the time, so it's been about 2.5 weeks since our anniversary, give or take.
Yeah.
So the trip was partially an anniversary getaway.
Nice.
But also partially since last year, my Christmas present from my wife were tickets to this conference called The Art of Teaching. So The Art of Teaching was, to be clear, the whole conference is about public communication.
Yeah.
But realistically, what it really is about preaching. So it's about how to become a better preacher. So the majority of the people attending this conference are really not like up and coming famous preachers, we're new to preaching.
Right.
But there are plenty of people who are in that room that have been preaching for decades and just honor and respect the speakers that are putting it on, and so they just want to hear what they have to say. And so there were people from all walks of life in the room, and so that's kind of what I was there for, what I was really excited for. We'll get into the conference in a minute. The reason this podcast might be kind of long is because I genuinely want to tell you, you and I talk about the cities and the food and the coffee so often that I can't I can't not talk about that aspect of Portland.
Right.
So we're gonna kind of get into both. But is it all right if we just kind of start with the trip first and then transition into the series? Okay, so I can just start going. But do you have any questions that like about my trip specifically?
Did you miss your flight? Because in my anniversary trip, we missed our flight.
I did not miss my flight.
It got to the point where literally we were like, we knew we weren't gonna make it, so we didn't even try.
Yeah,
we really did not.
I forgot about that. And that was this year when you went to New York City. Yeah.
It was in August. Like we were up at 3 a.m. with our kid, and we have TSA pre-check and everything, so we could have gone through security like this.
Yeah.
But we were like, nah,
this is not gonna happen.
This is not gonna happen. Yeah. My wife's like, we can still do it. I said, look, I don't want to start the trip all stressed out, all rushed, and then you get to sit down on the plane. You're like, yeah. I said, let's just wing it. Let's get some Starbucks. Let's get some Starbucks and get to the airport.
Couldn't be me.
So you made it to the airport on time.
Yeah.
And you got on your flight.
Not only on time. This is me we're talking about. So I'm at the airport 2.5 hours early.
Goodness. You know? It's not even an international trip and you're still there.
No. I've gotten stuck in security before, just standing in lines. Yeah. And I hate that feeling.
You don't have TSA?
No, I do, but Madison doesn't.
Okay.
So, and it actually didn't matter because apparently TSA closes after 7 p.m. So I showed up. And they only had one line. I was like, what in the world did I pay $100 TSA, get my fingerprints and background? What was the point of this if I don't even get to use it? I got to keep my shoes on, but that was it. I had to take everything out of my bags. And anyways, that's not at all related to this trip. But yeah, to answer your question, I did not miss my flight.
That's great. Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So we fly in. The trip is, I'm not good at short trips. In fact, I'm really, really bad at short trips. I just can't do it. There's too much I want to see, but I want to do it slowly. Like, I don't want to feel in a hurry.
How many days were you guys there?
We got there late Sunday night. Like, I literally landed. This was my fault because I should have bought the ticket sooner, but I was hoping they'd get cheaper. They didn't. They got infinitely more expensive.
They never
and the
do.
Options went down.
They never do. You always wish and hope, but they never do.
So we got in at like 12:30 at midnight, Sunday night or Monday morning. And then we flew out Saturday. So I was there for all of the work week, basically, essentially. So we had full days. So I land at like 12:30. Just for context, Madison was not going to the conference with me. So, but she was going to stay in the city the full time.
Right.
So we were originally going to get an Airbnb, and we decided against it because I didn't want to rent a car. I'm under 25. They were going to tag on a young driver's fee. And that was going to be a couple extra. It was going to be $200 to $300 on top of the rental car fee. And I was just like, look, I'm not poor, but I don't have that money either. You know?
Yeah.
And so we didn't. So what we decided was, okay, well, let's stay in downtown. Not at like the Ritz-Carlton, but let's stay downtown. And then that way, Madison doesn't have to Uber by herself.
Right.
Like, she can walk around safely. So what we found was this boutique hotel called the Society Hotel. No one in Portland is listening to this, but if for someone from the Society Hotel is listening, shout out to you. Great experience.
Society Hotel?
The Society Hotel. It's almost like a hostel, honestly. Like, it's an old hotel from the late 1800s. Like, it's not big. I mean, really small building. But so it's like a boutique hotel, like a fun experience, you know, more than anything. So most of the rooms, they have like shared bunk rooms, literally like a hostel. And then they have private rooms with a shared like bathroom, like on the hall. And then Madison and I, we were like, we don't want to do that. So we got the top tier, their version of a suite. And it's just it's literally just a room with a bed and some places to hang up your clothes and but a private bathroom, you know. And so that was like $120 a night, which is still cheaper than most like downtown hotels.
It really is. Yeah.
So that's where we stayed. But all of the reviews, so it's in Old Town Chinatown, if anybody is familiar with Portland. And all the reviews said there's some homeless people, but it's like totally safe.
Right.
What I did not know was that
where are we going?
Where are we going
here?
Was not just a few homeless people. It was like you couldn't turn a corner without some guy or girl that smells awful, like twitching against the building.
Really?
So what I've since learned is
Yeah.
Portland has always had a population of homeless people.
Yeah.
But since COVID, it's gotten really bad.
Right.
And then recently, like in the last couple years, the state legalized personal consumption of drugs. And so it's a
I
lot
see.
easier for people to get addicted
Right.
to things.
Right.
And so walking was not as safe as we thought it would be. So we spent a lot of money on Uber. By the end of the trip, I learned how to use the public transportation system.
There you go.
So I wish
Is it
I
just
had known
buses
that.
or is it subways?
There's no subways. There's buses, like like the DART kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and then something in between those two.
Yeah.
But it's like $250 for a trip with a
Uh-huh.
max of $5 a day. So
Yeah.
it's like you scan it once to go somewhere, and that lasts for like an hour and a half. And then if you scan it ever again, that's it. So it's like a max of $5 a day. So that's what I should have done from the beginning. But it was raining that week for the first week in a couple months. So you had to walk in between.
Yeah.
I'm not selling this trip, but I loved it. Like
Really?
everything about it was amazing.
Yeah.
Just some highlights, I guess. There's a famous bookstore. Call back to our I don't know what episode it was, but when we did the episode about reading, I was in reading heaven, for that matter.
Really?
Yeah. I guess we didn't do an episode about reading. We talked about Atomic Habits,
Yeah.
and then reading
Talk a little bit
became.
about. Yeah.
but,
yeah.
there's a bookstore that's famous in Portland
Uh-huh.
called Powell's. Have you ever heard of it?
Powell's. Where have I seen it? I feel like I'm like, you know, you remember some things and you see the logo. That's
Yeah.
exactly what's going through my head right now.
Yeah. So I thought there was only one within the Portland area. There's a few locations.
Mhm.
I don't know if it expands outside of that,
Mhm.
but that's from my understanding where it started. Picture like both new and used books, but like this 3-story building. With a cafe in the corner, like not like a Barnes and Noble cafe, like a real coffee shop
Yeah.
cafe in the corner.
Yeah.
But with just like rows and rows and rows of books. And I mean, just like you get lost. I knew it was big, but we walked in on Monday just to go buy books.
Yeah.
And I was just like overwhelmed of all the options. It was it was fun, but it was just overwhelming. So we went there a few times, spent a lot of
Mhm.
money. I think we walked away with by the end of the trip, I think we walked away with like 12 or 13 books. You know, like I brought a
Nice.
carry-on just to have room
Yeah.
for books because I
Yeah.
knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Food was phenomenal. I did not have a bad meal.
Really?
I had one meal
What was your favorite?
that I
meal?
didn't love. My favorite meal? Oh, that's hard. There was a place I went to that if anybody visits Portland, is from Portland, you've got to try Pine State biscuits. That's what it's called.
That sounds like a you place, Cadyn.
It does. It does.
I'm not gonna lie.
Considering I previously talked about biscuits and gravy, I did not love their biscuits and gravy.
Really?
But I did really like their biscuits.
Really?
Madison liked it, but she didn't just absolutely love it. They don't have like Whataburger's honey butter chicken biscuit,
Yeah.
but they have a build your own. And so I put fried chicken on it. And then they had whipped butter and honey. And it wasn't creamy like it was supposed to be. They don't
Yeah.
know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But but it had the same flavor profile, you know?
Yeah.
So I kind of made my little biscuit. I got a little diner mug. It's sitting in my office. You can see it
Nice.
later. That was probably my favorite meal. Thai food was great. If you
Yeah.
love Thai food, there was Thai food everywhere. And it was all good. I think I ate
do
it 3
like Thai
times.
food.
I had handmade Chinese noodles for the first time in my life. Those were amazing.
I've seen those Instagram videos of like making the noodles and
Yes,
it's falling
it's
straight
like just
into the
and they're
deal.
just like pulling it out and
Mm.
stretching it. This is not a food podcast, but this is what we did
That's
in Portland
great.
was read and eat food. So
That's great.
I went to 3 or 4 coffee shops a day, all of them different. I think I went back to maybe 1 coffee shop. Outside of that, they were all different,
Yeah.
all amazing.
Well, then I guess like okay, so you were in downtown, so you must have had more options food wise and more options,
Yeah.
you know, coffee houses and stuff like that.
But I've heard that that's fair. I mean, yeah, the further outside the city you go, the less options there
Right.
are. But I've heard that they're all good, is what I've heard. I mean, I didn't experience it.
I
so
need to go to Portland, Oregon.
You do. Everybody needs to go to Portland, Oregon. I will say the stereotypes that I've heard of Portland, those are all true. They're just like, keep Portland weird. They're like, it's very liberal.
Yeah.
People are very closed on religion. And a lot of the churches are very progressive. I walked to the conference that I was attending was at a church. A church I really admire and follow is called Bridgetown Church. But like I walked from a coffee shop to the church. It was like a quarter mile, and I passed a Methodist church with like a gay pride flag on their like bulletin.
Really?
And so I was like, well, that's different.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was like, that's different. But I come to find out that's not really different for Portland. It's just different for us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, we're in Texas. So
yeah.
We're a little bit in the South.
That's true.
We do things different around here.
We do things different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so food was amazing. I've got like a list of foods that I tried. We did pizza, Thai, Chinese. I think my least favorite meal, but my favorite coffee experience is this place called Proud Mary. Have you ever heard of it?
Proud Mary?
Yeah.
It's a great name.
Proud Mary, I did not know this till I showed up. Proud Mary is an Australian cafe. Like, not Australian themed, like from Australia.
Right.
And I knew of them. There's a coffee shop in Dallas. If you're native to DFW, it is one of my favorite in DFW. It's called Wayward. And they have a rotating coffee roaster. Like every month, they'll have a different coffee roaster. And then they have one that's their staple or whatever. But they have a rotating coffee roaster.
Right.
So I heard of Proud Mary through them originally. I just didn't look into them. Proud Mary is from Australia.
Yeah.
But they only had one cafe in all of the United States, and it was in Portland.
Really?
So I had to go.
Yeah.
Like, I had to go try it. And they're like, Proud Mary wins awards every year. Like they're
like
good.
baristas and stuff.
Yeah,
like that. That's
baristas. Cool. The coffee they roast will win like coffee awards.
Really?
And, like, for people who don't care about coffee are probably like looking at me like I'm crazy, but for me it was fun. You know, it's like I was able to nerd out. And they actually just opened one in Austin. So if you ever want to go visit Austin, we can go try one in Austin. So there's only two in all of the United States, and one in Austin. It opened like literally 3 weeks ago.
It makes sense that they would place it in Austin.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
So that was, I didn't love the food.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good, but I didn't love it. But the coffee was really good. I wish I had more food or coffee or whatever, but without like literally saying this is what I ordered at this place.
We should have had like, you should have brought a bag of coffee, and we could have been sipping on some like brewed coffee from your trip.
I did not buy a bag of coffee.
Jesus Christ.
I have so much coffee here right now that
like, I already have way too much.
Madison doesn't drink coffee, so every time someone gives me a bag, I'm like just drinking it by myself. So I go through it really slowly.
Got it.
But
you are forgiven.
I'm forgiven. But when there's so much coffee from there, I think my favorite coffee shop other than Proud Mary was this place called Never.
Yeah.
Both of them are very like I tend to lean, this is not a political statement, I just tend to lean more conservative than liberal. And both of them have very more like liberal values and mission statements and whatever. So like I'm not pretending like I'm aligning with their company or whatever. But in terms of like the taste of the coffee.
They have great coffee.
It was great coffee.
It's awesome.
Never Coffee. So that was a good one. That's the one, they do a subscription. And I did think about signing up for their like coffee subscription. So if I do that, then we can reconvene this and make comments.
Let's do that.
We'll pretend like we're in Portland.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that would be fun.
Yeah.
But
so your food experiences, you got there safely. You found a hotel, and the food was amazing. The coffee was amazing. I knew you were gonna sniff out a bunch of coffee houses.
Yeah,
I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
And then but the real reason why you went there is for this conference.
Yeah.
What before you go into like what really happened in the conference, before you got there, what were you expecting? And was it what you really experienced there?
I don't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Per se. So just for a little bit of context, so the art of teaching was, as a foundation or a company or a conference or whatever it is, was founded a little over a year ago by three people. Jefferson Bethke, who many people our age will know the name of or maybe the face of.
Yeah.
He became famous is not the right word, but he kind of became a viral sensation like 10 years ago on YouTube because he released this spoken word called what do you call it? I can't think of it now. Something about religion, we got to look it up because this is like this is what he is most famous for.
That's cool.
I talk to people now that think it's kind of cringy. I think it's Jesus is greater than religion. I think, but
so it's a YouTube video that went viral.
Yeah. Why I hate religion but love Jesus. Spoken word. It was literally. I just guess it really was 10 years ago. So that's what he became famous for. But he's grown. He was single in college, actually in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. And
he released this video, and then he did a few consecutive ones, and his spoken words, in my opinion, genuinely are really good.
Yeah.
But he went viral, became well known, and then he just kind of fell off.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't hear from him, didn't know much about him. Then in the last couple years, I started seeing more from him.
Yeah.
Just because of circles he kind of got invited to, started running with. So I don't know much about him from 10 years ago. I just kind of started following him again from the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But he got married, has kids. He does a lot with family ministries now. And so that's what he's most well known for now is like leading sons and family ministries. But he's on the younger end spectrum. Like he's probably in his 30s, like mid 30s. So he doesn't have a ton of experience, but he helped start this idea, this concept. So Jefferson Bethke, John Mark Comer,
right,
and John Tyson. So I talk about Comer all the time. I mean, in this podcast alone, not like this episode, but this We Don't Know It All. I have referenced him in a few episodes. John Tyson, I didn't really know much about till the last year and a half. He is a pastor from New York City. He's Australian, but has lived here, I think, since college. And so he runs a church in New York. I think it's called Church in the City or something like that. I have never, I follow him on Instagram, so I've heard little snippets, but I didn't know a ton about him. I knew that he is really big. Like he has this book called I think it's Intentional Father, I think is what it's called. He's really big on like intentionally raising your sons the way they used to in Bible times. Yeah. Not like some toxic masculinity thing, but just like we don't know. It's kind of like John Eldridge, like a little stronger stance, but like a different John Eldridge, Yeah. And so I knew that, and I also know he's really passionate about revival and prayer. Those are like his things. Mark Batterson just did, and by just I mean in the last 6 months, did a revival kind of weekend, and he invited John Tyson to come in and preach as one of the revival speakers, because that's his thing,
really?
And so I was coming into this conference, I was excited to hear from those three speakers. I look up to all of them in different ways, different reasons. There was a selfish part of me that just wanted to come to the conference because I was like, there's going to be 300 people here. It's not 3,000, It's going to be 300 people. I'm going to get to talk to some of these guys that are like my preaching idols, And
but I mean, even at 300 people is not a huge.
Yeah.
So it's actually the perfect size to where I could get a couple words in, which is great.
Exactly. And spoiler alert, I did get a couple words in, but not as many as I'd like to. We'll get to that later. So that's kind of I guess to answer your question, I don't know really what I was expecting coming into the conference.
Right.
I knew that I actually didn't even know that the emphasis was so much on preaching. I honestly thought the emphasis was more just on public communication and teaching and speaking. I thought they were opening it up to more people, but it was very much
that's cool.
This is a call to preach, and so which was really good for me actually. And so it exceeded any expectation I had, and then some.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So then you get there, the conference starts. What was your first day like?
So my first day, the conference was Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
Which was a shock to me because until we got there, I actually thought it was Thursday and Friday. That's besides the point.
That's great planning.
Yeah, great planning. Part of the problem was because Madison bought the tickets for me, all the information was going to her email.
Right.
Well, apparently there was also a meet and greet Tuesday night.
Thank God you were there,
Yeah.
and you weren't going to fly out.
Exactly. There was a meet and greet Tuesday night that I didn't know about until Tuesday morning.
Oh,
So,
I see.
Yeah. But I found out about it in time to go,
Right.
and it was free, and so it was just open to whoever was in town early. So I was able to go, but I found out right before I was going to leave that I actually had a friend from the DFW area that was going to the conference too.
Right.
But neither one of us knew that.
Nice.
So we met up for dinner, and then that was the first time I tried to use the bus.
Yeah.
And that experience did not go well. So I was we were late to this meet and greet. And so I'm walking into the meet and greet late, started at 7, I'm there at 7:45, and it goes to 9, you know? So everybody who was going to come was pretty much already there, you know? And so, but they were all, it was not intended just for you to meet the speakers. Like John Mark Comer was there, John Tyson, Jeff Bethke, and then there was one more speaker. His name's Charlie Dates. We'll get to him. He's a black preacher from Chicago.
Yeah.
Or a black pastor from Chicago. But I don't know if he was there or not, to be honest. But the three of them, that's who I wanted to talk to. But it wasn't intended just to meet them. It was intended to be a networking thing.
Right.
So that you could grow in community with other pastors.
Yeah.
There were so many different traditions, denominations, fellowships, all there.
Right.
That the hope was that you would make connections outside of your circle.
Which is honestly the best.
Yeah. Because a lot that we
Come out
do
here.
and our fellowship is all within our fellowship.
Yeah.
So it was nice to meet some other people.
Yeah.
But like I said, because everybody who was going to come was already there, lines to meet them were super long.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at going up to people to say hi, to talk to them, to meet them or whatever. I'm not good at that. Partially because I grew up with people doing that to my dad.
Right.
We'd go he would speak. He didn't do this a ton, but he would speak at a conference or general council or youth camp. And someone, or even just Sunday morning, someone would want to come talk to him. And he loves talking to people. He's not one of those guys that but at some point, he still likes talking to people, but at some point his schedule is dictating I've got to go. Yeah. But people don't always read that, you know? And so I did not want to be that burden for one of these guys.
Right.
They don't know that I exist.
Right.
And might as well be a pleasant, they don't know that I exist, rather than a negative, here's this guy that won't leave me alone, you know?
Yeah.
Which, to be clear, I was at a meet and greet. I should have just gone to talk to them, but I didn't. So the night's winding down. John Tyson looks like he's finishing a conversation. So I just go talk to some pastors next to him. And then he kind of turns around, says hi to us. I get to shake his hand. He seems like a really nice guy. But then he's like, all right, mates. He says mate every time.
Yeah.
I don't do a good Australian accent. But in his Australian accent, he's like, I got to go home. I'll see you guys in the morning. And then, so I got to shake his hand, but I didn't really get a chance to converse with him.
Hey, you got the all right, mates.
All right, mate.
That's up there.
Yeah. It was a good experience.
So that was day one. It was
that
a
day
little
one.
meet and
Night
greet.
one, day one.
You got to meet some pastors. That's cool.
So actual day one begins early, 8:30. I mean, early. It's 8:30, you know. So I'm nervous. I go. I sit down. And so the conference begins. The way that the conference starts is kicked off with Jefferson Bethke kind of introducing everyone, everything. Turns out he's not a speaker. I don't know if it's his lack. He's not a pastor, so I don't know if he's traveled as an evangelist. But
Right.
I don't know if it's his lack of experience or just what they decided for this particular conference, because they've done the conference 2 or 3 times now. But either way, just as I won't really talk much more about him, but it was really cool to see the way that he led from a position of honor and humility.
That's cool.
Without ever like
Right.
doing a session.
Right.
Because he was able to uplift all
Yeah.
the other speakers, but be himself in
That's
such a
cool.
way that I don't think a lot of people are very
Right.
good at.
Right.
And so that was really cool to watch that. He definitely has like a genuine spiritual gift of hospitality. And he did it well. So that was kind of cool. But he opened up the conference, and then he handed it off to John Tyson to really kick off the conference. So this was like, I still don't really know like what's happening.
Right.
You know, like I'm there just enjoying whatever.
You're like, whatever comes my way.
Yeah, whatever comes my way.
Wait, was this conference kind of like, was there a band and was there lights, or was it just more like intimate setting? Like, we're going to just talk to
It was in the auditorium of Bridgetown, but which is a pretty small auditorium.
Okay.
So there were no lights. There was a keyboard on stage that insinuated we were going to have worship at some point, but it hadn't happened up to this point. There was no special lighting. There was no, there was nothing. There were half the auditorium was tables if you got there early enough to sit at a table, and then the rest was just like your normal church service congregational like seating, you know. And so that was cool. I actually got there early enough to sit at a table, but I'm not good at sitting with strangers, so I didn't sit at a table.
I'm just gonna sit here.
I'm gonna sit in my seat, and so John Tyson kicks it off, and I knew that the first session, or really every session, was about an hour and a half. John Tyson stood there for an hour and a half and gave one of the most powerful, convicting sermons I think I've ever heard.
Really?
Yeah. Could also be the Australian accent, but it was genuinely, and I was like, I didn't know. I thought I was coming to learn how to speak. And right now, I feel like I could never speak as well as this guy.
You're like, I give up.
Yeah,
it's not gonna happen.
I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, I resigned. I don't even preach weekly, but Lord knows there's a reason for that, because I'm not John Tyson. That's for sure.
That's happened to me before, where you listen to someone and you're like, I'm never gonna be like near as good as this guy. So I'm just gonna hang up my gloves right now.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
This is his. In one sentence, this is what his whole sermon was about. Okay. It's no good to be a good preacher if you live a poor life. That was the rest of the sermon, was just this concept of, and he had these 3 points or 3 illustrations from 2 Timothy about whether or not you're a soldier or a civilian, or there was a third one. I can't remember. But it was like these different ideas, but and then he asked this question to us, because his whole thing was, we have so many people in church leadership and pulpits that don't really have the life that aligns them to be there, but they all claim they have a calling, and so we put them in there, but we don't I'm telling you, but we don't spend the time as leaders to sift through, like, does your life align strong enough for you to be in leadership over people? And he asked, let me just ask this question, and then you can say whatever. Let me ask this question. Would Paul have Timothy, because in the scriptures, Paul had Timothy put this person into leadership. Would Paul have Timothy put you into leadership in the church of Ephesus? I was like, I'm going to have to think about that one.
You know,
this was in the first 5 minutes of the sermon, in case you were wondering.
That is, okay, here's the thing. That statement alone, right? That one sentence line that you just gave us, like, I think if people were, like, really honest with themselves, like, that would save them. I mean, I've seen people run from the church because obviously it wasn't their calling, or it wasn't, and they run from the church and they never come back.
Yeah.
But it does take honesty from yourself to say, like, is this something that I'm really supposed to be doing? Like, is this just some fabrication that I came up with, and just because I see so-and-so having that lifestyle, and now I want so badly to be part of that lifestyle. And so if as a church, as leaders, if we got this one little thing right, it's not a little thing. If we got this one thing right, I mean, we could save a lot of people, and I'm not talking about like salvation, but like we could save a lot of people. I don't even say this. We could save a lot of marriages.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Well, and he goes on to like teach on this idea.
Do they have this online somewhere?
So
in a podcast or
in
something?
the actual conference, no. But if you go to artofteaching.co, I think we can if we remember, we can link it in the description of the podcast, YouTube, whatever.
So good.
But there's a masterclass that you can buy. It's not like $500 like normal master classes, but it's also not $20 either. So it may not be a resource that everyone can afford. But I honestly, I have access to the master class, but I went to the conference, so I haven't looked at it yet.
Right.
So I don't know if they may. I know there's speakers in the master class that were not at the conference.
Right.
So I know there were people at the conference, speaker wise, that are not in the master class. So I can't tell you if this particular sermon was there or not. But
so good. It needs to be there.
Yeah.
Whoever's in charge of that website, throw this up there like today, please.
We'll tag you, Jeff Bethke. Thank you. But he goes on, John Tyson goes on to say, like, not just, this is more of an idea, not a zinger, as he calls it. But like part of what we were looking at, what inspired this sermon was this concept that like Ephesus was full of like issues. The church in Ephesus was full of these deep-rooted issues. And Paul's solution to the problem of the church in Ephesus was better people. It wasn't better programs. It wasn't better whatever. It was better people. And there is no solution that now this is obviously more complicated than it sounds. But there is no solution that we can work around that is going to have deeper impact than just have better leaders. Yeah. And that is a conversation no one wants to have, because
absolutely not.
What if who's on your team isn't the leader that should be on your team? So I'm not just trying to drop mics and zingers and walk away. Like I fully understand how complicated this can make life. And he wasn't trying to like make us all reorganize our churches either. He was trying to make sure that we personally are the better leader. Like, don't get into the pulpit if you're not the better person. But it was just this whole idea. And he said, if you don't have the right life before you preach, then your preaching will do more damage than it does good.
That's right.
Because at some point, I don't like to name drop church pastor moral failures because I just don't. But one of the more famous ones right now is probably Carl Lentz. And he's walking through a lot of recovery. His wife, I saw a post from them the other day. Like, I think they're doing it the best way they know how, but at some point, like, if your life is not matching up with what you're preaching, at some point people are going to find out, whether it's now or when you pass away, like Ravi Zacharias, or like something. At some point, someone's going to know. And in that moment, do I think people's salvation should be deeper than what that moment is going to cause? I do. Like, I wish that wouldn't cause people to doubt things. But sometimes it causes current Christians to doubt if everything they've heard is even real. But more than that, people who are on the line of Christianity, it just preaches that we're all hypocrites. And anyways, that was a rabbit hole.
No, I mean, no, but still, like, it a lot of the biggest, and I'm going to generalize this, but a lot of the biggest issues that are happening in leadership, or in certain areas of the church are sometimes the simplest and smallest things that just require honesty from us. It requires honesty from the individual, requires honesty from the leader. And then it requires a lot of you got to search your soul, and you got to say, like, I am really not doing this well, and I really need to change these certain aspects of my life. Just like the point that you said about, like, if you're speaking and if you're saying something, like, your preaching could have all the right points to it, but if you're dead on the inside, it's going to be a dead preaching. Like, at the end of the day, it's just like your words are going to be dead.
That's from Charlie Dates. That was in session, I don't remember. It was either session 3 or 4. That's a quote I'll read when we get there.
But then God is so good. I'm going to say this, and I'll let you continue on to whatever's, God is so good that I went through a period of not speaking for a while. But then I spoke here at our Spanish campus service 2 weeks ago, and I had so many people. Not really, because I don't like to hear, "Oh, your sermon was so good." I just don't like. It makes me uncomfortable because I never know what to say. Right? So you say "Glory to God" and that's it. But I got a lot of this, and it was a little different. It was like, if you ever had a doubt that you're a speaker, like I'm telling you right now that you are a speaker. Like I had like 5 or 6 people tell me that, which felt like I was like, whoa, God's obviously telling me something here. Like it wasn't just like, it was very clear, very evident. But that doesn't mean that you're good. Like the first thing that I went home and I told Christy this. I said, this just means like that I have to like do better, be better.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a call to action for me. And like, I need to do all these things, and I need to like, obviously I have a prayer life, and we daily devotion, like all those things that you should do, the spiritual disciplines that everybody knows about that you should do them. However, like when God entrusts you with the pulpit and gives you a microphone, you have to take that very, very seriously, very, very seriously, because you could change your life for the good, and you could change your life for the bad. So you just never know.
No, absolutely. I'm trying so hard not to read every bullet point that I wrote.
Just throw them at us, man. Just look, at this point, this podcast is 40 minutes. This is going to keep going. So
we're in session 1. We're in session 1.
This is the first 3 hours of the...
Yeah. No, he was... he ended up building to this point, and he said, like this whole idea of your life outside of the pulpit is what matters. He said, do not tear down with your life what you've been trying to build with the pulpit.
Jesus.
If what you preach is torn down because of the way you live your life, it was all pointless.
I can't even. Jesus. Yeah.
There was such a heaviness in the room. I'm like, this is not... I mean, I'm obviously not going to re-preach this hour-and-a-half sermon, but I've got more points I'm going to share. But this was not a joke. Like, all of that was in the first 15 to 20 minutes of the sermon.
I love that it wasn't just about, like, this is how you make your sermon better.
Yeah.
But it was, like, a legit challenge.
Yeah.
And, like, a lot of, like, you need to, like, look here.
Yeah.
And see what needs to change, see what needs to be adapted, see what you need to, correct. Because, like, it's those tweaks, man. It's really those tweaks. One of my mentors growing up always told me that preaching was an art form. Preaching and speaking is an art form, and from the way that you wave your hands to the way your body language and all these things, they're an art form. And it's crazy how God communicates to somebody. But you could have the best thing written down on paper, and it could mean nothing. Like it could really, really mean nothing. And I don't know why I'm going to say this, but I feel like I have to say this. There's people listening to this podcast probably that used to be PKs and have maybe like stepped away from even church in general, or even just from like your calling, because you were called to preach. It's never too late. It's never too late to tweak those things. And if God called you to speak, and if someone's brought a word to you that you feel like you can trust and it was from God, it's never too late. Maybe that's why you're bringing us all these gold nuggets, man.
Zingers, as they say.
These zingers, so that somebody could zap their way back in.
Yeah.
Let's go. What else you got, Cadyn? Keep swinging.
He transitioned from that concept to, okay, now people's automatic reactions are, we need more accountability in the church. We need more like personal accountability. We need human accountability.
Yeah.
And he was like, look, I'm not against accountability. He was like, honestly, I'm not against accountability. He was like, I know people that had all the accountability in the world.
Yeah.
From elder boards to personal accountability partners to spouses to website blockers to whatever it was. Yeah. And they still had their moral failure. And he goes, where is it? This is less of a zinger, just like truth statement, so I wrote it down. But we must steward the gospel well regardless of who is holding us accountable. Like the whole idea of this isn't... Like you can't just steward the gospel well because someone is holding you accountable. Yeah. Because when you step into that season where they're not, does that mean it all falls apart?
Yeah.
it's a more fancy way of talking about the concept of integrity. Like this whole, like, okay, it's one thing to not look at porn or to get drunk or to abuse your spouse, or it's one thing to not do those things when someone is checking on you every 24 hours. Yeah. But what about when they're no longer checking in on you? And he gave this, I mean, genuinely, it's going to be less powerful for me, not even because I'll say it wrong, just because it's not my story, you know? I think there's power in telling your story, but that's besides the point. He gave this illustration to prove this point, and he said, one of my best friends, or best mates, as he says, was helping fund his church plant in New York City when they first started. And so he had this habit. One day he called and he said, "Hey, John, I just wanted to know how many people you've shared the gospel with this week." And John was like, "Well, you know, man, like we're in a hard to reach city. Like you've got to slowly like shift culture. You've got to build relationship with them. They're closed off to the gospel." And he was like, "Yeah, John, totally understand. Totally understand." And then they hung up, whatever. A week goes by, and he calls John again. He goes, "Hey, man, I was just wondering, like, how many people you've shared the gospel with?" Like, not judgmental, genuine question. Hey, how many people you've shared the gospel this week? John was like, "I thought we covered this last week about how we're building to this. We're getting there. We're working. We're like working on it." He's like, all right. And then called again the next week. It's like, "Hey, John, was wondering how many times you've shared the gospel with people." And John was like, at some point I got the message where it was like, I've got to share the gospel with people like that. Like that's what I have to do. Yeah. So he started sharing the gospel with people. He made it his mission. And then one day the calls stopped coming in. And about a year later, the guy called. He's like, "Hey, John, I was just wondering how many people you've shared the gospel with." And John had died out of sharing the gospel with people. And his whole point was like, it's a true story. It wasn't just like a metaphor. It like really happened. But he said, if what we are in charge of is the honest to God hope of the world, like at some point we've got to steward that message, whether somebody's calling in to check on us or not. Like at some point, our life has to be bigger than what we're preaching on a Sunday. Right. And I was just like, all right.
It doesn't just stop on Sunday, man.
No, it doesn't stop on Sunday. And I think it's deeper too. Like we were there for preaching, but like if you're listening to this and you're not a pastor, I honestly think there's some deep biblical truth there. Like as a Christian, regardless of what you're doing, like you are representing. This can be overwhelming, but you're representing God. Everything you do, to some like portrays the image of God. The Imago Dei is what we call it, and you've got to learn how to live up to that, even if someone's not holding you accountable. Yeah, accountability, super important, but it's not always enough. Like at some point, it's just got to be who you are. Yeah, but
that's so true. That's so true. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, get yourself a mentor. Get yourself somebody who's going to keep you in line, going to keep you in check. But I would even say this, that's like 10% of the battle right there. Yeah. Because your mentor's not going to be in the house with you. Your mentor's not going to see you in that place where you're all by yourself. I mean, it's just not enough. That's great.
I'm going to kind of skip ahead a little bit. I'm just making sure I'm not skipping any really good gold nuggets.
Don't skip the good zingers.
He quoted Howard Hendricks. I don't know who that is, but I wrote his name down. Good preaching has a price tag. You've got to be willing to pour out your life. And I think often, like, we don't really treat preaching like it has a price tag. And he does. I mean, it does. Yeah. But I think one of the things, honestly, don't really remember how we built up to this, to be completely honest. But I love it because I don't think we talk about it often enough. You have two ends of the spectrum when it comes to spiritual warfare. You have the spectrum that goes, this doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the spectrum that goes, Satan's in everything.
Yeah.
And every little thing that goes wrong, that's the enemy.
Yeah.
We're going to pray in tongues right now to rebuke that in this
Yes.
moment, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like mysticism almost. And it's like, so you've got the two ends of the spectrum. But I think there's a lot of people who are trying to find balance where I'm kind of going on my own personal tangent right now to build
Go
to
for
something. But
Go for it.
people are trying to find balance where there isn't balance. They need to find tension.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is a middle ground. I think some days the enemy's really trying to get you.
Yeah.
But I think there's other days where I'm like, you dug this hole for yourself.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do.
Yeah. No,
with
this is
the
all
enemy,
you're
you know?
doing. Yeah.
This is all you're doing. And I don't think there is balance. I think it's a tension that has to be managed. But that's besides the point. What he was saying was, and to be clear, we were talking to multiple different denominations. Not the Assemblies of God leans towards the supernatural and spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said there is a Satan, but so often now I'm paraphrasing and I'll go back. So often in our faith, there is no room for an actual enemy. You have God and miracles and your faith, but there's no actual enemy. And so he said what that leads to psychologically is if you don't have an enemy in your faith, then all we have is fallen humanity. So without the enemy, which sounds spiritual, like when you word it, it sounds really spiritual.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we've got God and then we've got us fallen humans.
Yeah.
And just sin and fallen humans. And he said, but without the enemy, without the greater enemy, we want to fight sinful people or God himself because there's no one else to turn our attention to.
No one else left.
If your faith doesn't have room for Satan to be there, then you got to fight someone. So it's either going to be people who you don't agree with or God himself. And
both are bad.
Both are bad.
Both are, because then, I mean, obviously God.
Yeah.
But then you could be fighting your own family.
Yeah.
Your own spouse, your own. Yeah.
And I'm not claiming that John Tyson's not God himself, so I'm not saying you're going to agree with everything that I'm conveying or anything, but I think there's some truth to it, even if you don't agree with it fully.
Yep, absolutely.
With this idea of let's look at, I am not the expert to talk about racial reconciliation. I'm just not, for a myriad of reasons. I don't know enough. I've not lived enough. I don't have the experience or knowledge to talk about that context. With that said, I think that one of the reasons we turn on each other so fast is because we often refuse to recognize sometimes the real divide that Satan can put there, the racial divide.
Yeah.
And yes, I think that it's really deep. I think that there's a lot of factors that are there. I'm really not trying to pretend otherwise.
Right.
But I think that so often there is an enemy that causes strife too, and sometimes our faith doesn't allow for that. And so instead all we can do is blame people.
Yeah.
And sometimes the person's an idiot, but
that's so good.
Anyways,
that's really good.
Yeah.
That is really good.
That was a rabbit hole.
Some people out there are getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Well, and keep in mind, this was all based on a scripture where Paul or Timothy or I don't remember is teaching about preachers and how they're soldiers and civilians, and a third one that I can't remember. And so that was where this was coming from, was there's an enemy, which means we're a soldier. Is this idea. There is a spiritual battle that is actually happening. Yeah. And every time we get up in the pulpit, there's something that we're doing that is a spiritual battle.
Right.
And to pretend like it's not there, you turn your eyes to something else to put your fight into.
Yeah.
Because at your core, you're a soldier.
Yeah.
And then he kind of switches to civilian for a moment, just one little point. And he says, if you live like a civilian in a battle, then all you will ever become is a casualty.
Jesus.
If the battle's happening, you can't live like a civilian because that's how you become a casualty. And so he
That's
said,
wild.
most of the things that make you ineffective behind the pulpit are not great sins, quote unquote great sins. They are small things. Do not lose the anointing on your life because of small things.
Jesus Christ.
He's like, yeah, the great things. You got like obvious porn addiction and an affair. And those happen.
Yeah.
But for the majority of pulpits in America,
Yeah.
where pastors are publicly faithful, it's like, it's not the great sins that will take you out.
Yeah.
It's the small things, the miniature compromises,
Right.
the outburst of anger,
Yeah.
the debt that you let get out of hand,
Right. The buildup of things that like, and then it becomes something that you can't escape, or the little thing opens the bigger door, and then the bigger door, and then you say, well, I got away with this, so I'm gonna do this, and so on and so on. And it doesn't have to be like adultery or anything like that. It doesn't have to be anything that deep, but it can become little things that lead to something bigger.
Misplaced priorities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start neglecting your family, you start doing all these things, then it's okay because they were okay last Christmas, or they were okay
and it's not
last...
even a sin.
Exactly.
You know? So it's like justified.
You're like, I'm doing work for the Lord. Yeah, but your family hadn't seen you in a month. So
he kind of switched to this is where the rest of it was really good, obviously, but this is where for me it like started to really hit home. And I was like, can we just end the conference here so I can process and we'll come back? But he said there are some things when you are called to be a soldier that are fine for civilians but are not for your calling. And that could be different for every person. But he said when he was younger, becoming a preacher, he was complaining about things that other people were doing, but he like wanted to do, and he had a mentor look at him and say, partial calling from God, partial mentor. He said this phrase, and I put it in quotes because it's a direct quote.
Right.
Others may, but you may not. It's not a sin, but because of the weight of your calling, others may, but you may not. There's a reason that soldiers live. Like, just think about today. I'm not talking about Roman soldiers, although that might even be a better study, truthfully. But I'm not talking about some ancient culture. I'm not talking about while I believe in real spiritual warfare, I'm not even talking about that right now. Like, look at the actual military. They live a very disciplined life for a reason. There are things, now they drink a lot and whatever, but like what they do, the commands they learn, everything that they do is with a certain end goal in mind.
Right.
And it's like they can flip and follow commands on the flip of a dime, you know? And they're trained to the T. They know the words, the answers, the actions. Actual muscle memory doesn't technically exist, but the concept, psychological, they do things because they're disciplined to a T. And there are just some things, like, that's one thing. Now back to the spiritual side. Yeah. There are just some things that when you are called to be a soldier that are fine for civilians, but are not fine for your calling. Yeah. And he went on a tangent about Yellowstone. And
really?
Yeah. He said, he was like, I got COVID for the third time, like a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And so I tried to pray. I couldn't focus. I couldn't pray. I tried to write my sermon. I couldn't. So he's like, I just turned on the TV and decided to start watching Yellowstone. And he was like, the next thing I know, I'm like 3 seasons in. And like I just binge watched for days this Dutton family on the Yellowstone Ranch. And he said it so quickly, like so fast, just shifted how my priorities, like I became so wrapped up in this fictional ranch. Yeah. And my values began to align with their values. Yeah. And he was like, I honestly think there's nothing wrong with the show, was his like thing. He was like, I have no issue with it. And there are other things that I don't have issues with that people do. Yeah. He's like, his point is, I don't tend to watch a ton of entertainment or TV or movies. He's like, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But for my calling, my time is better placed elsewhere. Yeah. And he was like, it's not a sin. There's nothing about it that's a sin. Right. He said, others may, but I may not. And he was like, for you, I don't know what that looks like. He was like, I challenge you to figure out what it is, because the weight of your calling is much heavier than you probably treat it. And to some degree, you've got to figure out, what is it that God has asked of me that I'm not willing to give up?
That's a good one to like write down.
Yeah.
And like constantly remind yourself of. If you hold a position of leadership, if you hold a position where you're constantly speaking to people, and you're you know, there's certain things that as a minister, as someone who and you don't even have to preach. Like if you're a worship leader, like if you're a youth pastor, whatever the case is, like there are certain things that you're just not going to be able to do just willy-nilly. Like I'm gonna just, do these things because you're set apart. Like you're somebody that's gonna be different, and with that job comes certain responsibilities. Spider-Man, you know what I mean?
Yeah. This next statement that he mentioned when he was kind of closing out that idea, and this is the statement that has stuck with me this entire time.
Okay.
I mean, there's literally everything that's stuck out.
I was like, that's not true.
But this is the one, like, when I've had 30 seconds to talk about the conference, I pull up this quote.
Okay.
We are in a culture that is so lukewarm, like so deeply lukewarm, that anything that resembles discipleship is dismissed as legalism.
Jesus, that's so true.
Why does the phrase, others may, but you may not, or the phrase, there are some things that when you are called to be a soldier that are fine for civilians but are not for your calling, why is it that it twists our stomach? This is my personal reflection. Why is it that it twists our stomach? Why is it that our minds tend to shift towards, well, if it's not a sin, why are we being legalistic about it? Honestly, I agree with him. And I would go further, honestly. Yeah. I would say that it's not just our culture. I think it's church culture and church leadership.
Yeah.
I don't think we treat the weight of the call of God as highly as maybe it once was.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to be legalistic, but I think we have devalued honest to God discipleship.
Yeah.
And we're so lukewarm we don't see it. And so anything that involves discipline we dismiss as, oh, that's legalistic. It doesn't have to look like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to look like that.
Yeah.
So it's because it doesn't have to look like that, it's legalistic. And no.
Right.
We celebrate Atomic Habits as this clear, like, mark your goals and pursue them.
Right.
But then when it's spiritual discipline that marks you as a different person, it's dismissed as legalism. And I want to be clear to both you and our listeners slash watchers, like, we're speaking in very general, like, I'm making some generalizations.
Right.
But I'm making them based off of things that I see and experience.
Right.
I'm not like...
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to pull things out of nowhere.
No. And I think a lot of pastors will agree with you. A lot of lead pastors will agree with you. Because we tend to just say, like, that sounds like it's going to stretch me too much. Let's just call it legalism. Yeah. It's going to take change in my life. So let's call it legalism instead. Or it's going to take for me to really search in here, or for me to admit where my faults are at. And because I don't want to do that, let's just call it legalism. And we tend to do that. We tend to come quite a bit. And you look at even the generations that are coming up now, there's a lot of, like, we're just not going to do that. And the worry there is going to be this, is that their parents are running away from the way it used to be, which was a healthy environment or a bad environment, I don't know. But they're running away from it so much that they're gonna be so far removed from even the good things, like, like if we say we're gonna have prayer meetings 6 o'clock in the morning every day, there's a healthy aspect to it, but then there's also gonna be like, well, are we like doing things for the right reason? And obviously good comes out of praying. However, there's such a shift between your parents or your grandparents' age, and then where you are at now, where it's like, when's the last time you had a prayer meet in your youth group? You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
And I don't want to minimize actual spiritual abuse. I genuinely don't. But I think everything has become spiritual abuse that is tied back to holding you to a standard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just because a pastor held you to a standard doesn't mark it as spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
Spiritual abuse exists.
Yeah.
But discipline and standards are not the markers of spiritual abuse.
Absolutely not.
But that, I think pastors are afraid to hold people to a standard and I don't know what the system looks like, and I don't know if I was in charge how I would lead it, and there's a lot to wrestle through.
Right.
But I think it's just the first time I've really heard some of this.
There's a lot of people that I know that are very far away from a life in Christ that have gone through it's very real. Spiritual abuse is very real, and it can hurt somebody, and it can hurt a family, and it can hurt ministries, and it could hurt, you know, just even it could create a stagnant growth in the church, and it could it could kill a church. So it's very real, but I think your point is very valid as well, where we just don't really see it for what it is.
And just to go back to like the whole context of this teaching was two pastors to evaluate themselves. Not like don't become of a mob.
It's so
like
good, though.
It's
so good, because I honestly, like, I've not, and I've heard of conferences. I get this one.
Well, and I appreciate it, because his heart, it had nothing to do with like don't take these words. I mean, he didn't say this, but his heart wasn't to take these words and use them as spears against pastors you don't like. You know, like this was to be a honest self-evaluation of yourself. So this has been a deeply convicting and honest evaluation of myself. I just think it's too good to not share. You know. I'm gonna go through these last points a little faster, maybe less expounded. If you want me to expound on one, just let me know.
All right.
You know,
cool.
But he kind of wrapped that up a little bit with like the reason it's worth it to him to, like, others may but you may not, is he was like, I just don't want to live a shadow call. I don't want my call, my leadership, my pastoral ability, my preaching, I don't want it to be shallow. Just because I felt like I can't give up Netflix. I can't give up video games. I can't give up whatever, you know. But I don't want to live a shallow call. If there is not preparation in the secret place, then there will be failure in the public place. It's not really a new idea, but I think it's powerful. You know? We have to be people that are deeply formed, but that also steward the power of Jesus. There's kind of two waves of Christianity right now, the spiritual discipline wave and the supernatural wave. And he was like, we've got to learn how to steward them both. Like, we need to be deeply formed preachers that aren't afraid of the power of Jesus. And he said, this was kind of a challenge to us, was he was like, I want you to know that we need waves of preachers. He was like, we need more people battling this culture than we've ever needed. So he said, I don't want you to shrink back just because the weight is high. He's like, the weight is high, but I'm not trying to talk you out of ministry. I just want you to recognize the weight that you carry based on the calling that God has placed on your life. He was like, the goal is to be a person that accepts a challenge. He said, we don't need spectators in the kingdom of God anymore. He said, we got too many of those. We got too many pastors that are just spectators. We are separated from the process, and we're addicted to the immediate, which my dad has he doesn't say that, but he has that idea of like, it's like a microwave culture and a crock pot God, you know? And I totally agree. We don't like process. We hate process. I'm a slow moving guy. I still hate process. My current job is about process. I still hate process. We're addicted to the immediate. If the fruit that remains in you I don't know what I was trying to say there. I must have had a bunch of typos. But he went on this tangent about like fruit and the sweetness of fruit, and he quoted T.D. Jakes. He was like,
Of course.
yeah, he was like, this is the best sermon I've ever had or heard from T.D. Jakes.
Of course.
And he just said this phrase, but the taste. And it was this idea of the nutrients and fruits and vegetables are much more potent because of the time and patience. So it increases on the vine.
Yeah.
Like the longer
Yeah.
they stay on the vine, it increases. Actually, that wasn't T.D. Jakes. That was one of his friends who was actually genuinely talking about fruits and vegetables
Right.
he like grew. So I got two separate stories mixed up. T.D. Jakes is coming later.
Yeah.
We need, everything is about the quality of our lives, not the quality of our talks. And then his last thought and my last point from the session, we need people that are willing to cleanse and consecrate themselves to become better Christians.
Yeah.
Those are the pastors that we need, the ones who are willing to cleanse and consecrate themselves.
Well, we've always heard it, right? Like good Christians make good Christians, bad Christians make bad Christians. And so with that said, if there's this huge wave, imagine if we had a huge wave of pastors and preachers who were speaking like true gospel, like that had those simple values aligned with God of like family and, you know, the Holy Spirit and these disciplines deeply enrooted in them. And we could correct some of the spiritual abuse that has happened in previous generations, and we bring that into today and what could potentially happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we could live a revival like never before. And those kind of things excite me. Like, I am super excited to see what could happen in the future. I'm super excited about, there's a lot of bad happening. I see it, guys. Like, I'm not like living in a cave here. Like, I totally see that. But these conferences, these talks, these nuggets, when applied in the right place, could have ripple effects. Like I mean, you could not measure it. Yeah. But if we flip the coin, one bad seed in the middle of it could hurt a lot faster. Yeah. So like a fire, right, could spread in a bad way really, really quickly, but a good fire could control the fires. So what I'm trying to say is, look at all these points, examine your life, and do a self-evaluation, and really ask God to change what needs to be changed, add more of whatever needs to be added, and really tell yourself, like, I really want to do this. Like, I really want, this isn't just like some kind of selfish calling. This isn't just something like I just want to be like them. I want to go be around these circles. I want to be a famous preacher or a famous pastor, whatever the case is. Like I think God's gonna give a louder voice to certain people, because that's what happens sometimes, and they're gonna reach more people. But if God, at the end of the day, I can fully say this: if God keeps me in this building for the rest of my life, then I'm okay with that. But if He takes me outside of this building where I get to speak by the grace of God to more people, then I'm okay with that too. But there's something very special about saying I completely submit to the authority of God, and I'm gonna let God do whatever He wants to do with my life. Yeah. Good, bad, change, remove, edit, undo, whatever He wants to do out of my life. But and there's this piece that comes from it that is very, 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 very unique. I've stumbled in my life. I've done a bunch of things, and I think everyone has, right? But all those things should make us better. I've gone through spiritual abuse, but that healing from that has made me better. And so you just grow as a leader. You grow as a speaker. You grow as someone who is sharing the gospel. And when you take nuggets like everything that Cadyn just shared with us, and you really truly apply them to your life, you're going to find out that not just are you going to become a better speaker, but your family's going to be better. Your family's going to be healthier. Your surroundings going to be better. You can become a better mentor if you're mentoring somebody. Yeah. And it could have a deep, 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 deep effect on someone's life. And at the end of the day, that's what God calls us to do, is just to go and speak and tell others about Christ. But He doesn't want us to sound like, look, we want you to follow God, but try to ignore all these bad things that I'm doing. Just see the Sunday morning version of me. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what's happening with this generation, a lot of what's happening with the current culture setting.
Do as I say, not as I
yeah,
do.
exactly. Exactly. So, Cadyn, what else do you want to share with us? Any last zingers? This is the longest podcast that we've ever did. So we're in an hour and change.
I'm
now.
like, we might be dividing this up. I don't know.
Yeah, we might have to do a part 2 about this one, huh?
So I guess it's up to you. I mean, we clearly can't go through the rest of the
I'll tell you what, wrap
but
us up on this one, but leave us with a really good zinger if you've got one in there. Wrap us up with this one, and then we'll see if this becomes a part 2 based on the reaction of people from this podcast, maybe.
I don't have any new zingers, but I think I just want to kind of bring us back to where we started.
Yeah.
With kind of 2 quotes that go together. It's no good to be a good preacher if you live a poor life. And would Paul have Timothy put you into leadership in the church of Ephesus? Like, do you... Obviously, right now, we're kind of talking to church leaders, but even as a Christian, like, do you understand the weight of the call?
Yeah.
And have you spent enough time in honest reflection to accept that weight, to do something with that weight, to learn how to carry that weight, and to do it in such a way that honors God and honors the people that you're leading or walking alongside?
I want to say this. It's not always... There's people that aren't called to preach.
Yeah.
And there could be a different calling for you, right? But one of the ways, and I'm not saying this is the only way, one of the ways that I've been able to know that God has called me to do certain things within ministry is because you understand how much responsibility is on you. And you start taking your sermon preparation a lot more seriously, into a completely different level. If you're a part of the kids ministry at your church, you're going to take that and you're like, they're just kids. But no, you take it and you add a level of seriousness like that you never have before. From that handshake, if you're part of First Impressions team in your church, from the graphic that you create, you start adding this level of seriousness because you understand the weight and you understand what God has entrusted you with. If you're a musician or whatever the case is, God has entrusted you with something, and you should not take that for granted. Like no one should. And so with that said, I think I do see us going in an uphill battle at times. However, like we're gonna get to a certain part of the hill or the battle that it's gonna be more of us.
Yeah.
I truly, honestly, truly believe that, because I do see a genuine hunger from the up and coming generation to know about God, to trust about God, and not only that, but the beautiful part is to share about God. Yeah. So I do see us turning the corner, but it's pivotal for those current church leaders and church pastors to examine their lives and to rectify what needs to be rectified, fix what needs to be fixed, and then for us to mold and shape the next generation in the correct way and try to avoid some of these things that maybe were done to us in the past as we were growing up. But God is so good and full of grace that I'm telling you, like, I'm genuinely excited about the next 10 years in the church and see what happens. That's if Jesus Christ doesn't come for us, which would be the
Lord shall tarry.
The Lord, But yeah, this was a great conversation, Cadyn. Thank you for...
I got so many more nuggets in here for later sessions.
Thank you for sharing it. And he's got so much more knowledge. We're gonna make sure to leave some notes there. We're gonna add the information for the conference. There's another one happening in next year, right?
Yeah. So so the conference started last year, I think, for the first time.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it. They did one in like South Carolina, I think, but for the most part, they've been doing them at Bridgetown. But they keep selling out. So next year they're doing one in Nashville. I don't know if that's public knowledge yet or not. So
You said something very cool though. You said something about that it's never going to be the same content, right?
Well, specifically next year, they said that it's all going to be fresh content.
That's
so
awesome. That's great.
For better or worse, if you're wanting to hear these teachings.
I've been to conferences where it's like, okay, you're saying literally verbatim the exact same thing that you said last year. I want a refund kind of situation.
Listen, if John Tyson did this exact teaching 5 years in a row, I would be fine. But the rest of it would be cool, So they promised fresh content. you can see all of this on the website.
Yeah.
If you have a little more capital or money, there's retreat versions that are much more intimate, I guess. Like there's one in Maui, there's one in Virginia,
Yeah.
and it'll be like 20
I feel like
to 30
God is
people.
calling us to Maui.
I think so, yeah.
I think
absolutely.
God is calling us to go to Maui
Absolutely.
for a week, and we'll find a coffee house out there somewhere.
And then there's the master class.
Praise God.
Praise God.
Praise God. No, well, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. It was a bit of a longer one. It was a little bit more serious, but Cadyn literally walked into my office saying, like, we've got to talk about this. And when he says that, I knew we needed to talk about it. So thank you, Cadyn, for sharing all these awesome nuggets. And hopefully we did the topic some justice.
I hope so.
And if you've got anything to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. Leave us a nice comment. And if you feel like you're struggling with this, obviously we want to make ourselves available to as much as we can, right? But to pray for you, and you don't have to go into detail. If you just need prayer, let us know. And I'm not really sure why I'm saying that, but I feel like saying that if you honestly genuinely need prayer, and if you're going through something, send us a message. We'd love to pray for you. It'd be an awesome thing to do. Cool. Any last thing you want to say, Cadyn?
No, I think I have a newfound weight for the calling of God, but I can with full honesty say that I think the best days of the church are ahead of us, not behind us.
I believe it.
And all it takes is the few that are willing to recognize the weight of the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. This was episode 7 of the We Don't Know It All podcast. We've got great things in store. There's 3 more episodes left before the end of the season. You don't want to miss out on a single one of these episodes. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.
Peace.